Hello, 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 and welcome to the 15th and last episode of Mixed Media Reviews Season 3. My name is Kelsey, and today I'm going to be talking about a movie. The final movie of the season is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I had, of course, already read the book prior to watching the movie. However, I did read it back in 2020, so I didn't quite know exactly what was going to happen. I did actually like the book. I remember that. I know people had mixed feelings about it, but I thought it was pretty interesting to see the world through Snow's eyes. I had also, of course, read the original Hunger Games books, as well as watched all the movies. I do talk a little bit about the Hunger Game movies earlier in this season in episode 3, where I talk about my favorite movies to have on in the background. So if you want more on my thoughts, you can hop over to that episode if you like. So what is this movie about? Well, Google says the following. Years before he becomes the tyrannical president of Pan Am, 18-year-old Coriolanus, which I was pronouncing it Coriolanus? I don't know what I was doing, but Coriolanus. So years before he becomes the tyrannical president of Pan Am, 18-year-old Coriolanus Snow remains the last hope for his fading lineage. With the 10th annual Hunger Games fast approaching, the young Snow becomes alarmed when he's assigned to mentor Lucy Gray Baird from District 12. Uniting their instincts for showmanship and political savvy, they race against time to ultimately reveal who's a songbird and who's a snake. Oh, clever. I really liked this movie. I know, such a surprise for me to like something. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't quite remember everything that happened in the book, but from what I do remember, it seemed like they did a pretty good job. So let's start with some of the, I guess, more background kind of stuff that I liked. Obviously, the architecture is my number one. I really liked all the architecture that we saw throughout the film, kind of in the post-war era. We didn't get much of during the war since it was just kind of like a snippet in the beginning of the movie, but we could tell it was dark and derelict, so nailed it. Flash forward to 10 years after the war, and we saw a lot of the same kind of brutalist architecture that we saw in the other Hunger Game movies. We also got some of that kind of neoclassical architecture, which, if we remember our history, were both styles that dictators have liked. These styles were really there to showcase their strength. It spoke to the power of the government, which is exactly what we'd expect the capital to focus on post-war. In fact, I Googled some of the buildings that they used, and for the exterior of the in-games arena building, they used Hitler's 1936 Olympic Stadium in Berlin. And in general, a lot of the movie was filmed in Berlin, where we get a lot of those brutalist and neoclassical kind of styles in architecture. So awesome setting for it. And again, it really showcased exactly kind of where the capital was and where their focus was. The more Renaissance-y kind of buildings that we also saw in the last film weren't really around yet, which makes sense because in this period they're still establishing peace and they're still kind of rebuilding, so they're really focusing on showing their might to make sure that there's no resurges from the rebels. And it really makes a lot of sense, and I really, really enjoyed seeing all of that architecture represented in this in the film. I also really loved Gall's laboratory. It's absolutely gorgeous with its cast-in-place concrete and its tie holes and those really amazing pillars that gave some Frank Lloyd Wright S.C. Johnson building vibes. If you don't know what that is, you should take a look because it was really cool. They call them lily pad columns. I also Googled this building, and it's also in Berlin, of course, and it's called, please forgive my whatever comes out of my mouth, but it's called the Crematorium Baumschulenweg. 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 So whatever that letter word thing says. But it's a funeral facility, and the pictures of the rest of the interior are absolutely breathtaking. It gives a little bit of Tadao Ando vibes too, but not as light. I mean, there's still a lot of light, but Tadao does something with concrete that just kind of makes you feel like it's not as oppressive. Whereas this building, I think, still gives a little bit of that that kind of modern, that kind of brutalist heaviness, if that makes sense, even with its light. I don't know. But yeah, a really gorgeous building. Highly recommend looking it up if you're interested. And also a fun fact, apparently John Wick was filmed in this building as well. So I'll have to, I don't think I've seen the fourth one yet. Anyway, yeah, really, really gorgeous building, and I loved it, and I couldn't stop staring at it. It kind of stole every scene it was in. Um, but maybe that's just me. District 12 also looked really awesome. It kind of mimicked that first film with all the blues and the monotone colors that we saw. It felt like the District 12 we know, which makes sense because, of course, there hasn't been a lot of progress in, like the 65, 70 years since then. So it makes sense that we saw a lot of it as, kind of broken down and similar to the vibes that we got in the other movies. Also, speaking of attire, with their blues and their monotone colors, I thought they did a really great job of the fashion throughout the film. The Capitol was still a bit wild, but more restrained than what we saw in the Hunger Games. And like I said, of course, District 12 felt very similar. And Lucy Gray had her own fashion sense that very much felt like traveler or kind of southern country fashion. So I thought they did a really great job kind of mimicking what should be mimicked from the later films, but also kind of being a bit more restrained with the Capitol since, of course, they're still rebuilding and they're still kind of finding their footing. So it makes sense that they're still pushing the boundaries, but it's not at the height it is when we see them 60 years from now where no one really remembers the war, and they're all kind of doing body configuration or modifications, and they're just really pushing those limits because, it's a lot more frivolous then. Speaking of Lucy Gray and her vibes, her country and her traveler vibes, I really loved what they did with all the songs. They felt a bit country, and her voice had like a little bit of that twang. I thought it's just really amazing how they brought those songs to life. I loved them so much. I thought all the actors did amazing as well. Obviously, Viola Davis was phenomenal as Dr. Gall. She really played that part well. Peter Dinklage was great as Dean Highbottom, and I liked that they used a couple people who weren't super well known to play the leads, much like the Hunger Games did. Rachel Zegler and Tom Blythe as Lucy Gray and Coriolanus, respectively, were great. I will say that they didn't have great chemistry all the time, but I think that's okay because I think that was kind of maybe the point. You're not really supposed to know if it's real between them because they don't really know, and even Snow isn't quite willing to, fully love another person, so of course he will feel a bit more reserved with his feelings, whereas Lucy Gray, you could kind of tell she wore a little bit of her heart on her sleeve. Hunter Schafer, I think how you say her name, as Tigress was also great. I liked that even at a young age, it felt like she was headed toward the Tigress that we had seen in the last film, with her kind of barely there eyebrows and her thin frame. She held herself similarly as well, and I thought that was a great way to portray the character. This may be more about the source material than the choices made by like the director or screenplay writers or something, but I did like that this was a story about how a man was turning into a villain. He wasn't born the evil Snow we see later on, but we see his roots, and we see the roots of that evil. We see a man born in terrible circumstances, born to a household that didn't have the best role models. We hear Tigress talk about how much hate his father's eyes held, which was a really great scene. And I liked that at the end of the movie, she plays it back at him where he asks, how do I look? And she says, you look just like your father. Ah, such a good scene. And we see him believing that he knows what is truly right throughout the film, yet he constantly makes bad decisions that lead to worse consequences. Every time he justifies it to himself that, it's a way for him to survive, or it's because it's the right thing to do. Yet it's pretty much always the wrong choice to make. And yet he doesn't ever see it as the wrong choice or that the consequences are his own fault. If he makes a choice to go against something like, in the end of the movie where he develops feelings for a person from District 12, he believes he's making a choice that is okay, that it's justifiable, even though he's breaking the rules by traveling outside of the district to the lake with her. Yet when his friend makes a choice to help some people from District 12 to leave, to also go outside of the district, he deems that as a bad choice. And he then makes the choice to, shoot the mayor's daughter, to send a recording to his friend, which of course are 2 more deaths that he's responsible for. And while he does count them both as people he's killed, he still doesn't really believe that their deaths were ultimately his fault. He still blames his friend for the choices he made, and that he basically brought it upon himself. We also see him building throughout the film to the man we see, in the original books and films. We see the switch flip when he kills that boy in the Hunger Game arena. He said it felt powerful, which is, of course, when Tigress tells him that he doesn't need to be his father. He can be and is good. But Snow continues down that path and continues to make those bad choices, and we see how he begins to build his own strategy to get ahead. A strategy that he continues to use and is very much shown in those later Hunger Game books and movies. Because while he did begin to care about Lucy Gray, she was still a way to get him to the next level in life. And when she no longer served to help him, he kept her around, but that was because he believed he had another way to the next level. He wasn't able to get the Plinth Prize, but he was under the impression that if he worked as a peacekeeper, he could eventually kind of climb his way back up to the top. And if he could do that and she was with him, then that was just a bonus. But when he realized that she too could be an obstacle in his way, that was when he truly snapped. Lucy Gray knew it would happen, right? When he lied about who the third person was that he killed, she knew in that moment that he could no longer be trusted, and she knew that he could easily kill her without even hesitating, because she saw that man slowly emerge, right? When he didn't even hesitate to kill the mayor's daughter. I also really liked that we see the origin of his love of poisons, as well as the origin of the hanging tree song. I think it makes a lot of sense why Katniss got to him just really under his skin so well. Not only do we get the funny scene by the lake where they dig up Katniss and you kind of see him flinch and it's funny, but we see how much Lucy Gray and Katniss are alike. They're both determined, unafraid of speaking up for themselves and for others. They didn't have to help the people that were in their district, but they chose to anyway. Obviously, both are, in District 12, but we get things like Lucy Gray's bow that mimics Katniss in the second movie when she's doing the private showing of her skills before the games. Or I guess Katniss mimics Lucy Gray in that scene. But yeah, Katniss even sings her hanging tree song. We see a lot of similarities, and it makes sense that Katniss would so thoroughly get under Snow's skin because of it. Of course, by, just being the face of the rebels and by undermining him, that would do that too, but it got really personal in a way that really makes sense now that we know some context. I'm sure Snow saw Lucy Gray in her from the moment that she volunteered for her sister. I'm sure if I watched the movie again, I would pick up on some things I didn't like, but upon first watch, I thought it was really good. I guess I could say that I wish we had a bit more backstory of both characters like we got in the books, but it was already like 2.5 hours long, so I get why we didn't. And some of the stuff for Snow I think could have been a bit better to understand where he's kind of coming from. His general dislike of the districts at first, and some of that we could have seen, because I think his grandmam talks a lot about it, and I think him growing up during the war and the post-war war and the fact that, his father was killed in District 12, some of that kind of got into the movie, but I think if we got more of it, maybe some of it, his descent into evilhood would make maybe a bit more sense. But honestly, I think it got across fairly well as it was. And some of the backstory for Lucy wasn't shown, but she did kind of mention some of the things, like the song and everything. But yeah, I've been trying to sit here, think of things I really didn't like that were more specific to the movie itself. But I can't really think of anything else, so I liked it, I guess. If you like the original Hunger Games, I think you'd like the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Like I mentioned earlier, I think it was a great glimpse into Snow's head. And even though some people were upset that this book even came out, I think that if you give it an honest chance, I think you'll like it too. I think, lots of I thinks, guys, but I think they did a good job of not trying to justify why he becomes the way he does, like some of these kind of villain origin stories kind of try to make you sympathetic with the villain. But I think they just do a really good job of showing us his journey into it and not trying to make you feel for him, because there's certainly a point where you kind of feel for him and you want him to do the right thing, but as he continues to do the wrong thing, I don't think anyone really sympathizes with him. And especially at the end, I don't think anyone's sympathizing with him anymore. So I thought they did a really good job of that. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Thank you guys so freaking much for sticking with me while I took a pause to finish my exams. I really appreciate it, and I'll be taking another break for the holidays, since I went a bit longer into November than I thought I was going to. But I should be back in January. I'm thinking mid-January maybe, but I may post some things during the break just for fun, so keep a lookout for that. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast. Please leave me a comment to let me know if you agreed, disagreed, or if you have any suggestions on future episodes. Or just comment to say hi, or give me a like. I would really appreciate it. You can also find me anywhere you find your podcast, probably. I'll talk to you guys next year. Have a wonderful rest of the day, the year, and the holiday season. Bye!